Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here and to share my few ideas with you. And I hope you will be able to use some of them in your work. So today I am going to basically be looking at what Utoni has already said, which is models, theories, and meta-theories. So the objective really of the workshop is for you to appreciate why theories, concepts, and models are important in research. And also, you should be able to describe how theories and models are used to address a research question. And you should be able to differentiate between theoretical and conceptual framework. And consequently, you'll be able to apply theory in your own research. You see, theories are important to research. Before I go into that slide, maybe I should actually underscore the fact that theories actually they help us to come up with new knowledge. So they are key to innovation. And I will revisit this point at later on during this presentation, how theories actually lead to innovation and how we should be using them for us to be innovative. So I think you are aware now as researchers that research is dependent on methodologies and theories. So some people are even say that there is no research without theory. How far that true is a contested area, but I believe theories are indeed a pillar of research. So the methodology deals with the construction of theories and their testing. For example, if you are using qualitative methodologies, you are likely to construct a theory. That's an example. Or even if you are using mixed method research, you can also construct a theory. And then after constructing those theories, because then the quantitative people generally are the one who test the elegancy and confirm the theory. So that's where methodology becomes important. So it is supporting theory construction and theory testing. Methodology assists us to investigate theory. Hence, we actually refer to methodology as a meta-theory. Meta-theories, normally, they don't explain anything. They only help us to provide a lens to investigate the world. So this is why paradigms, for example, they are not theories. I know that there are some few scholars who have advanced the fact that paradigms are theories. But paradigms, just like a methodology, these are meta-theories. They help us to investigate theories, but they don't explain the world. That's what I mean. So paradigms and their aspects like methodology, epistemology, ontology, and etc. They are there to help us investigate the world and investigate theory. So these are the meta theories. Theories about theory, if I may call it that way. Theories help to explain the world. And I've already said that there is no science without theory. Though I said it is a contested kind of position, so it's up to you really to find out more whether you can have science without theory. But the most important thing about theories is that theories are social constructions. In other words, theories are not universal statements. And this is where we need actually to take a step back and look at the theories that we use. Generally speaking, what happens in this space is that you try to get a theory and you fail to get a theory to address your research, and then you approach your supervisor or a colleague, and the supervisor is likely to give you the theory that they use themselves. And this is why now some theories appear to be universal, because the academy is actually perpetuating the belief that those theories are universal. But I can take a step back and say to you, theories are not universal. Let's take, for example, I think most of you would know Marxism. There was a Jewish guy called Karl Marx, and he came up with his theory of Marxism, right? And this theory of Marxism is based on the dominance of the workers in the world, if I may say. In other words, Marx was saying workers are the ones that produce what is in the factories, so they should own the means of production, and they actually should equally share their products, if I may call it them, with the owners of capital. So Marxism, therefore, is the opposite of capitalism, where a few people own capital and the majority of the people work for them. So the workers were supposed to unite and rule the world, if you may call it. So it was a very popular theory in Europe, and I think you'll agree with me that Europe was an industrialized continent, to the extent, therefore, that most of the people were workers. So now when we came to Africa, when we started fighting for our independence and democracy, we embraced Marxism. And Marxism was never successful in Africa. Marxism was never successful in Africa, not because capitalism was strong, but it was not successful because we were trying to use this theory in a different context. So we decontextualized Marxism and they took it as it was actually propounded by Marx, that the workers should actually unite and rule the world. So when we came to Africa now, we found that there were no workers. In Africa, there are peasants. The workers are in the minority. Peasants and the rural people are in the majority. So then how then do you take that theory and apply it in Africa? That was the question. So the problem that those people who tried to apply it in Africa, the problem was that they did not try to adjust or to adapt the theory of Marxism to the African context. So I'm giving you this example. I know that you are not Marxist and you are not intending to become a Marxist, maybe, but I'm giving you this example to show you what happens if you try to apply a theory in a different context. And what you are doing, most of you, is actually you are taking theories from the dead Germans, the dead French, the dead English, and you are trying to apply those theories in your context today. So you are actually decontextualizing those theories. In other words, therefore, you cannot produce relevant knowledge. You cannot produce knowledge that can change the world. You cannot produce innovative knowledge. So you keep on actually, this is why actually I'm sitting here as a professor. The world is still the same as I found it, because I am using theories that don't generate any new knowledge. I am using theories that actually don't support innovation. So as the scholars of today and the scholars of tomorrow, I want you to take a step back and say, these theories that we are using, are they helping us to produce innovative knowledge? And you'll find that maybe they are not, but it is not up to me to say so. But sitting where I am now, I know that the theories that I have used, by and large, they don't help me to generate new knowledge. And therefore, the research that I am doing maybe is not really moving the frontiers of knowledge. So it's probably the high time that I also reflect on the theories that I use. I'll come back to this point again as I present. So therefore, my example was to show that theories are social constructions, and therefore we should not be captured by these theories. We should actually use them in an innovative and a generative way. And the theories also, they cannot explain everything. And we should not universalize existing theories and elevate them into grand theories. Because grand theories are supposed to be explaining everything. But the way conceptual problems about grand theories, that's why actually people moved away from grand theories to middle range theories, as I'm going to explain later. So we should use theories that help, as I say, to transform our societies. We should also explore indigenous theories. I am going also to try to link indigenous theories with their existing knowledge as I go on. So therefore, we are going to be looking at theories and concepts. Theories and concepts overlap, and they share certain elements. So if you were to ask me, what is a concept? And if I am to be down to earth, I will say a concept is a description or representation of aspects of a phenomenon. Therefore, a concept represents an aspect of something. And if I want to be a bit complex, I will say concepts constitute a professional language in a given context. I think you'll agree with me that this is why, for example, when I'm sure you have dealt with what they call turn it in. I know people call it a plagiarism software, but it's not a plagiarism software. Turn it in is supposed to help you to identify similarities. So you find that there are terms that turn it in will always pick if you are writing in a certain discipline, because there are professional concepts that are used in that discipline. There is no way you can describe whatever you want to describe in a discipline using any other concept other than those. Like that, like if I'm talking about methodology, I cannot have another term for qualitative or quantitative. It will be either quantitative and qualitative. And if you turn that document into a similarity index detecting software, it is going to detect those professional concepts. And this is why actually when you look at turnitin reports, you must actually be able to say these are professional concepts, so therefore they are not any element of similarity, because they always be similarity because these are professional concepts. So what I'm trying to say, therefore, concepts constitute a professional language, which you cannot do without, right? So they are in a given context, and they are used to classify and structure experiences and observations, right? And the concepts are the ingredients of theories. So we start with concepts, and then we go to theories. And therefore, a theory, therefore, can be described as a number of concepts that have a relationship. There are concepts that are brought together, and they constitute one whole that is constituted by those concepts. And then concepts, as we have seen, they are ingredients of our theories. And the concepts, to me, they are almost at the same levels as models. Because remember, a model is a representation of the main aspect of something. You remember when I don't know now how you start drawing a human being. When I was in grade, I didn't go to grade R myself. I started with grade 1. When I was in grade 1, when I was drawing a human being, I would have a round thing on top, and then I would have a stick going down, then another 2 sticks representing the hands, and then 2 sticks again downwards representing the two legs. So for me, that is a model of a human being. So when you draw that, you are saying this is a model of a human being. This is the major parts of the structure of a human being. So that's a model. So in other words, you can actually take a theory and model it. You can have a theory and model it in order to produce another theory. So you're taking the major aspects of a theory and actually using them in your study. And indeed, most theories, they start off as models. A model is then refined to come up with a theory. And there is a tendency among scholars to use theories and models interchangeably, but they are not the same. As I have demonstrated, a theory is constituted by a refined relationship between concepts. And then you can actually model those concepts from the theory and have your own model. And again, you can also have a conceptual framework from the theories. So for me, a model and a conceptual framework, they operate at the same level. It's unfortunate that I'm presenting virtual. I cannot make representations. I cannot actually draw these things I'm talking about on a chart or board. But I think you can basically understand what I am trying to say. And let's take another example of a cake. I know most of you like cakes, and most of you know what a cake is like. You have eaten them on your birthdays and the other important celebrations. Let's take a cake and ask ourselves, what are the concepts that form cake? In other words, what are the ingredients of a cake? I think you'll agree with me that we'll make different cakes, but I'll just tell you my own cake. My own cake would have water, it will have flour, it will have sugar, it will have maybe milk, it will have, oh, now I cannot bake a cake, look at me. And yeah, it will have egg maybe, and etc., etc. So after mixing all these things and baking them, I have a cake. So this cake is made up of a number of ingredients. So if I were to take out the flour from the cake, and I tell you that I am eating a cake when I'm eating flour, I think most of you will be actually thinking that there's something wrong with me, or I've taken a certain substance. That's why I'm thinking that flour is cake. So it is the same with theories. When you take a theory, or you take an aspect of a theory, in this case, the aspect of that theory is flour. And then you go on to say, I have a theoretical framework, I have a theory. How can you have a theory when it is only an aspect of the theory? In other words, how can you have a cake when flour is only an aspect of a cake? So once you have flour without the other ingredients, it's no longer a cake. So once you have got certain concepts from a theory, without all the aspects of a theory, we no longer have a theory. So this is what I'm trying to say by saying concepts are ingredients of a theory. Concepts are ingredients of a theory. And the same applies to concepts that can be ingredients of a model. But as I said, models and conceptual thinking, they are almost at the same level. So therefore, a theory shows a relationship between concepts. And theories are defined as either grand theories or middle range theories or substantive theories. So in empirical research, or in the research that we are doing, we use middle range theories because they tend to be contextual. They tend to address the context. Whereas grand theories, they try to universalize the explanation of the world. Like, for example, the theory of Marxism is actually a grand theory, in my view. It's not really a middle range theory. it tries to universalize the explanation of the world. So having unpacked the difference between theories and concepts, I want us now to say, on the basis of a theory, you can have a theoretical framework. Let me think of another theory, which I think maybe most of you might have encountered it, especially if you are from the social sciences background. The Maslow's theory. I think you know Maslow's theory of basic needs. Yeah, which has got a pyramid, starting from the basic needs, which is shelter, I think, and going to the highest point, which is self-actualization. Right? That is a theory that some of us were familiar with. Maslow's theory touches of what basically a human being needs. You start off with your basic needs, then you develop until you get to self-actualization. So if you are to take that theory as a whole to inform your study, then your study, you have a theoretical framework, right? Your study has got a theoretical framework. I know that there are also scholars that use the theoretical and conceptual framework interchangeably. But as I'm going to demonstrate, these are two different concepts. A conceptual framework is different to a theoretical framework. So a theoretical framework, as I said, in the case of Maslow's theory that I used as an example, you are using all the aspects of Maslow's theory. That is from the basic needs up to self-actualization. But if you are going to use aspects of Maslow's theory, then you don't have a theoretical framework. You now have a conceptual framework. You have because what determines your theory or your conceptual framework is your objectives or your research questions. So the constructs in the theory must be there in your objectives. So if you take Maslow's theory, maybe it has got, let me just say from the top of my head, it has got 5 concepts. So if you are using Maslow's theory as your theoretical framework, you are saying you are going to use all the 5 aspects of Maslow's theory. So therefore, a theoretical framework is used when an inquiry is underpinned by a single theory. I think we should remember that it must be a single theory and you must use the whole theory. So I'm actually belaboring this point because this is where we have conceptual problems when we come to applying theoretical and conceptual frameworks. So your study must be underpinned by one theory. And you must use the whole theory. In other words, your research questions or your objectives must be reflected in the constructs of a theory. You shouldn't just say, I have a theoretical framework because your supervisor needs a theoretical framework. Or I have a theoretical framework because the reviewer of your manuscripts says that there must be a theory. You must use a theory because it is going to assist you to measure or to understand the concepts that you are investigating. So therefore, a conceptual framework and a theoretical framework are conceptually different. I think I've demonstrated that what a theoretical framework is, but I haven't clearly demonstrated what a conceptual framework is. Yes, I haven't demonstrated very clearly. I've only shown you that if for you to say this is a theoretical framework, you must be using the whole theory to understand the concepts or the constructs that you are trying to measure, or you are trying to investigate, or you are trying to explore. So that is your theoretical framework. then what is a conceptual framework? This is where I am going to take a bit of time, because I am actually of the view that at this level, we should actually be thinking more of conceptual frameworks than theoretical frameworks. You remember I said that theories are not universal statements. But again, knowledge is not built in a vacuum. Knowledge is accumulative. So in other words, what we do today is a relationship with what has happened before us. This is why we talk of standing on the shoulders of giants. So if I were your supervisor and you come to me, I should see you standing on my shoulders. You shouldn't actually be telling me things that I know. That means you're not standing on my shoulders. You're standing on the same ground with me. But when I am supervising you, I expect you to see further. So therefore, if I'm expecting to see further, I'm saying, look at what you are investigating. And look at some of the theories or some of the knowledge that is existing in the area that you're investigating. In other words, look at the theories that are there in the area that you're investigating. But I don't want you to just take those theories like a given. I want you to use those theories as a framework to develop more elegant explanations. In other words, I am driving you towards a conceptual framework rather than a theoretical framework. I don't want you to be using those theories of the dead Germans, those theories of the dead French. I want you to use aspects of them because I acknowledge that knowledge is accumulative. But I want you to show that there is an accumulation by taking an aspect of those theories and marrying them to your context, marrying them to your experiences, marrying them to understanding of the context that you're investigating. So this is why I'm saying I'm more inclined to using conceptual frameworks than theoretical frameworks. Because in a theoretical framework, we are just applying the theory that is given. So there's no room for me to be innovative. I'm not saying go out there and start throwing away all the theories and not using them. But I'm saying that as you use them, try to reflect and say that this theory was developed in a certain context. So it cannot fit all contexts. Therefore, I must take aspects of that theory in order to understand my context. And then I must take aspects of my context, and then from there, I have a conceptual framework. Therefore, what is a conceptual framework? That is a difficult question. To me, a conceptual framework can be developed in many ways. You can pull together components of various theories. You take this aspect from this theory, and then it becomes your objective. Then you take this aspect from that theory, then it addresses the objective. And so forth and so forth. And then from those aspects, you have your conceptual framework. So your conceptual framework is based on theories. As I continue, you will realize that I also caution scholars against theory diversification. Don't use a lot of concepts from a lot of theories. If you find that your research is informed by more than, I always say if it is informed more than, is informed by aspects from more than 4 theories, then there's something wrong with the way that you are going about your research. It means that your research is not focused. If it is focused, I always say that to me, if it is focused, you can use aspects of at least 3 theories. And maybe 4, but not more than 4. So you can pull together various components of theories and they become your conceptual framework. So your conceptual framework is based on a number of theories. And in this case, I said I always prefer 3 to 4. So my conceptual framework is based on these 3 or 4 theories. And then I define those concepts. Say, when I looked at theory number 1, I discovered that that theory is not addressing all the objectives that I have. So I need to find another theory to address this aspect of my research. So I go and get that theory and I extract that aspect from the theory, then I bring it to the table to form part of my conceptual framework. And the other way of having a conceptual framework, you may find that your area, there's no theory. You know that there are emerging disciplines and there are no theories in those disciplines. And therefore, you are going to use concepts from the literature. So the literature, the concept from the literature can actually be the basis of your conceptual framework. I remember if you Google my PhD thesis, I don't have a theoretical framework, and I don't have the term conceptual framework. But if you read my chapter 2 brings together all the concepts about the phenomenon that I was investigating. So now, as I was going about my research, I use those concepts as the line where I'll hook my ideas. So I didn't have any theory, but I used the concept from the literature to give my conceptual framework. So that's another way of having a conceptual framework. And you may be investigating an area that is that has not been extensively investigated. Like if you take our context, there are indigenous contexts that we have tried to investigate in the past using methodology, research methods like ethnography and all that. And in most cases, you find that most earlier ethnographers, they did not paint the African or indigenous societies accurately because they were using their own stereotypes. And as a result, we find that those areas are still under-researched. And therefore, we find that there are no theories that may inform those areas. So what you should use, therefore, is your own experience of that indigenous context. Say, what concepts can I come up with to try to explain this context? And then from those concepts, you start to have a broad explanations about a phenomenon. And those broad explanations, they become the basis of theories. People can now use those broad explanations to try and test them. And then after testing them, they can actually come up with a theory. So normally, where you are dealing with an area that is under-researched, you want to explore, you want maybe to use qualitative or maybe mixed methods, but generally you use qualitative methods, because then you construct the theory, and then after constructing the theory, the quantitative people come and test that theory. So as I conclude, I want to go on to show you the 7 ways that no, 5 ways, 5 or 7, 5 ways of, now there are 7, because the paper I'm writing now, I have the 7 ones, but I won't give you the 6th and the 7th today so that you will look forward to reading that paper. There are 5 ways that I have here of constructing a conceptual framework. And I wanted to start with circle number 1. Putting together concepts from various theories. I think I've explained that partly in my previous slide. So you look at your objectives and you find that the theory that you have does not address all the objectives. So you extract those aspects that addresses your objectives and then look for another theory to address the other objectives. And then you may find that one theory only addresses the objective, and then you look for another theory to make sure that all objectives are addressed. So that is putting together concepts from various theories. So those concepts must be there in your objectives for you to say that you are using or you are applying the concepts appropriately. And when you decide to have a conceptual framework, you should actually tell the reader why a conceptual framework and not a theoretical framework. Why did you decide to use a theoretical framework and not a conceptual framework? And again, if you are going to use a theory, you must tell the reader that there are many theories But I selected this theory because of its appropriateness, but not the appropriateness. You must actually specify how appropriate the appropriate theory is. To just say the theory is appropriate for my study is not enough at this level, because you are supposed to show that you've mastered, you can philosophize around theory, you can master theory and its application. So you must tell us exactly why you think that theory is applicable to your study. What aspects of your study are being addressed by that theory? So you must actually be specific. So therefore, when you are putting together concepts from various theories, you must actually show the deficiency of those theories in addressing your phenomenon or in addressing your research question. So therefore, you are saying, yes, this theory is very useful, but unfortunately, it does not cover all the issues that I'm investigating. So I need to find another concept from another theory. I don't want to, I'll kind of give you a linear kind of argument to start with, because I don't want to confuse you. So this is why my argument will be linear a little bit. So you actually forgive me for that. So my argument, therefore, is that this theory has got aspects that address my objectives, but other objectives are not addressed by this theory. So I'm going to look for other aspects from another theory, and then have a conceptual framework. So you'll be operating in cycle one. So as a novice researcher, I want you, when you get these slides, you must decide which cycle you want to operate in. So if you're operating in cycle one, then you are looking at various aspects from various theories, or various concepts from various theories. So you're putting these concepts together and they form your conceptual framework. And then you may want to operate in cycle number two. Like maybe you have two objectives. And you remember I said Maslow's theory has got 5 aspects or 5 concepts. And you want only to use 2 concepts from Maslow's theory. You don't want the rest because you are not worried about the rest of the needs. You're only worried about basic needs. Therefore, you're going to use an aspect of Maslow's theory. So if you're using an aspect of Maslow's theory, it means therefore you have a conceptual framework based on Maslow's theory. But that is not a theoretical framework because you are only using concepts from Maslow. And then I want us to go to cycle number 4. I'm deliberately skipping number 3. So you decide from number 2, you decide maybe you want to operate in the cycle number 4. There are 2 theories, for instance, and these 2 theories, they address all your objectives. So because you are using 2 theories, you cannot say, because I'm using all aspects of the theories, therefore I have a theoretical framework. The moment you use more than 1 theory, you now have a conceptual framework. It's just like even when you are triangulating theories, that's where you can use more than 1 theory, where you are trying to show that the one theory is better than the other. Or the one theory explains the phenomenon better than the other theory. The moment you are doing that, when you are triangulating theories, you are not having a theoretical framework. You are now having a conceptual framework because you are now triangulating theories. No longer one theory. It's more than one theory. Therefore, it cannot be a theoretical framework. It becomes a conceptual framework. So even if you are triangulating theories, you still end up with a conceptual framework. You don't end up with a theoretical framework. As I said, for a theoretical framework to be called a theoretical framework, the whole theory must be used, and only one theory should underpin your study or your research question. And then I want us to skip to the last cycle, number 5. I think this is the cycle that I described as addressing the lack of what I call a theoretical or conceptual framework in my study. So I went into the literature and I combined concepts from the literature to form my conceptual framework. Right? So when you are operating that circle, you are actually saying little is known about this subject, and I don't want to borrow theories. I think Dr. Okoma at some stage is going to come in with the subject of theory borrowing, but I'm going to touch on it just in passing, maybe in the next slide. So I don't want to borrow any theory, so I am going to look for concepts in the literature. And again, the reader must know why you are not borrowing the theories. Because theory borrowing, for example, it has been seen as a way of undermining a discipline. In other words, it is a way, you will be confirming that your discipline is not mature, and therefore you are going to be borrowing theories from others instead of yourself theorizing and coming up with theory. But the idea of research is to theorize and come up with theories rather than just borrowing. Because if you continue borrowing, it means that your own discipline is not developing. So you need actually to start theorizing about your own context, and then in the end, you come up with broad explanations that can be tested to become theories. And then the last circle, number 3. That is the circle that I want you to consider operating in. I'm not saying operate in circle number 3. I said this is the circle that I want you to consider to operate in. So in circle number 3, I go out there and I look at the theories that are existing around the area that I'm investigating. And then I take aspects of a theory, or as an aspect of a theory, or I take aspects from theories and I put them on the table. And then I combine those aspects with concepts from the literature. And then I also look at my personal experiences about the phenomenon that I am investigating. Then I also combine, I also extract certain aspects from my personal experience and then combine those aspects with aspects from the theories. And as I take aspects of my personal experiences, I am also using my knowledge of the context. And I may be modeling the context. So from the knowledge and the models of the context, I can also infuse those into my conceptual framework. So you see, therefore, if you are operating in circle number 3, you are likely to produce innovative knowledge, because this knowledge is speaking to your context. This knowledge is speaking to your personal experience, and indeed, probably the experiences of people around you. So you are likely to come up with new explanations, with the new knowledge, because you are actually using a conceptual framework that is relevant to your context. So if we are going to, for example, going to transform our societies, if, for example, we are going to talk about decolonizing our societies, I mean, the knowledge discourses in our societies, we need probably to reflect on operating in circle number 3. This is where there's room to actually incorporate our context, our experiences, our understanding of the context, and so forth. So this is where actually it ties in with my argument that theories are not universal. They cannot explain all contexts. They can never be universal. Yeah, I think that's where, let me not belabor the point further. I think I will just say, for me, if you are listening, when you get these slides, please try to operate in circle number 3. And you may even engage me on this aspect, because that way also I sharpen my understanding and knowledge of conceptual frameworks. Now I want to briefly look at use of theories, or maybe I should have said misuse of theories. A theoretical or conceptual framework should not be used simply because you are told by your reviewers or your supervisor that you need one. You should actually have one if it is appropriate and necessary. So in other words, therefore, these tools of conceptualizing research, they should be used to answer the research questions or to address the research problem. So therefore, the theory or the conceptual framework should be fit for purpose. So a conceptual framework may be used if there is no theory that fits the concepts to be studied, or when various theories are used to guide a study in the absence of a single theory that offers a comprehensive answer to the research question. So that's when we should actually use a conceptual framework. And as researchers, we must be explicit about how the theoretical framework assisted in guiding or developing the research. We should actually be transparent. I always talk of theoretical transparency and a methodological transparency. Those things are supposed to be explained so that those who come after you may be able to replicate or even to move the frontiers of knowledge further based on how you have applied the theory. And indeed, people who are at PhD level, for example, the use of theory in a different way may be a source of originality. To say, yes, a lot of work has been done in this particular area, and the theories that have been used are these and those. But now I want to move a step further in applying these theories, and that's where my source of originality and my contribution is in this particular area. To show, for example, that I am going to triangulate theories, and there are studies in this particular area that I am aware of that have triangulated theories. And I may actually say I want also to use concepts from my own experiences. Most studies have tended to use theories wholesale without contextualizing them. That is my contribution. So you see, by explaining how the theoretical framework or the conceptual framework helped to guide the study, you're actually showing your own contribution also as a researcher. And as I said before, you must tell us why this theory and not the other one. Because it is not very likely that in any discipline there's only one theory. There will be a lot of theories. And then if you are borrowing the theory from another discipline, tell us why you think that this theory is better than the theories that are already in the discipline. You remember that, especially in the humanities, we tend to borrow theories from for example, sociology. Like these days, we borrow a lot of theories from the computer technology-based subjects, and etc. and etc. And why are you going that route instead of actually using the theories that are in your discipline? So there can be an element of theory borrowing. And you must explain why you are borrowing the theories that are not subjects. So if you go and check some of the theses that has been written in your discipline, you find that maybe some of the theories, or even every theory that has been used, is not part of your discipline. They're either from other disciplines other than yours. So ask yourself, why did these people borrow? And are you going to continue borrowing, or are you going to start developing your own theories by also theorizing about the phenomenon that you are researching on? So you should actually explain the utility of the theory or theories to inquiry, so that you are not accused, for example, of theory dropping. I think most of you know name dropping. So theory dropping is also the same as name dropping, where people drop names unnecessarily. For example, if I were to drop a name, for example, today, I may say Last night, I had dinner with the president, Cyril Ramaphosa. That is name dropping. Because remember, we are meeting now about the subject of theories, models, and concepts. And suddenly, I am bringing in my having dinner with the president. What is the relevance? It's not relevant. What is its contribution to our argument? Is not contributing anything. So that is name dropping. So it is the same also with theory dropping. You just get a theory and you just introduce it to your study, and the theory does not help you to address any problem in your study. I have seen that even at conferences with senior professors. Oh, my study is informed by this theory. Then you listen to the presentation, expecting to see the application of that theory until to conclude. Then they conclude. Then say, but why was that theory even mentioned? Why was that theory even introduced? And I have seen, I've looked at a number. One of the things I do in my study, or in my research rather, is scholarly communication. The patterns of how people use theories, the patterns of how people use methodologies. And I have investigated a number of disciplines, and you find that a theory is introduced in the methodology or in the literature section, and that theory is never mentioned until the thesis is completed. They ask, why was it introduced? Was it to increase the number of pages, or was it because the supervisor wanted to see a subheading called theoretical framework? So we should guard against dropping theories. And another problem I want to also to address that might arise in the use of theories is theory diversification. If I tell you just briefly, the reason why I became interested in theoretical and conceptual frameworks, it was because when I started supervising some 10, 15 years ago, I had this very good student of mine who had read widely and was using 10 theories in a study. So I conceptually, I had a problem. But by that time, I wasn't well read on this concept of theory use. So then I said to myself, oh, this is a very good student. She can apply 10 theories to a study. It shows that she reads widely. She's aware of the theories in the discipline domain. And you'll be surprised that even my examiners did not have any issues with that. And the thesis passed. But afterwards, I reflected and said, but how can, if these theories are used to explain the phenomenon under study, how can 10 theories honestly explain a phenomenon? Does it mean that this study has got 10 objectives? And these 10 objectives are covered in all these 10 theories? My answer was no. And therefore, I made it my duty to understand better the whole concept of theoretical and conceptual frameworks so that I can actually inform and mentor my colleagues and students better. So then I realized that that student fell into the trap of theory diversification. So you shouldn't actually fall into that trap in your research. As I said, if you are going to use aspects from more than 4 theories, then ask yourself, is my study focused? Am I really focused on what I want to research on? And then if you decide to focus, you may discover that indeed only maybe aspects from 2 theories are addressing your study. So let's avoid theory dropping, theory diversification. And some people may even say avoid theory borrowing because it doesn't develop your discipline. But that is up to you to make the call. So with those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I will entertain some few questions or even entertain some few comments because I am not talking to empty vessels. You also have your own ideas about conceptual and theoretical frameworks. And then this is the time maybe Ms. Majila, that we can engage. Thank you very much for your listening and for your patience. That is the end of my presentation. And at the end there is a bit of literature that I used to put together this talk. And if you are interested very much in this area, and most of the ideas that I gave you today, they are found in the last source there, the bottom there. That is theory and theorizing. In fact, actually, I'm actually having a book project again, but this one is theorizing in information systems, because I am very passionate about theory. So let's engage, and then I get your sense of what you think conceptual and the theoretical frameworks are, and then I'll further develop my ideas around the issues that you help me with. So I thank you very much for the opportunity. I end here.